Paul Donovan is a graduate student with Florida State University completing a master's degree in clinical social work. He is the membership chairperson for the Gainesville unit of the Florida chapter of the National Association of Social Workers and was the recipient of the unit's 2013 Social Work Student of the Year Award. Paul interned with Alachua County Court Services Outpatient Treatment Program, or OPUS, and was a volunteer with the University of Florida's Health Integrative Medicine Program, and serves as an alternate member of the board of the University of Florida's Institutional Review Board. Prior to deciding to change careers and become a social worker, Paul worked for 15 years in marketing, advertising, and international business. He was the president of the Association of Vacuum Equipment Manufacturers, a member of the International Statistics on Vacuum Technology Working Group, and was appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce to serve a 3-year term on the Florida District Export Council. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
So nice to see you. I knew you in another lifetime or another career. Mm-hmm. I know you weren't involved in vacuum cleaners, but before we dive into social work, can you explain a little bit about your previous career in vacuum equipment manufacturing?
Sure. I worked for a company called A&N Corporation out in Williston, and we're a manufacturer of vacuum flanges, fittings, and valves that are used for semiconductor production and high-energy physics research and things like that.
Okay, well, I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. My eyes might glaze over a little. So, you know, this is interesting. I know that the County Commission, there's going to be a proclamation celebrating the work that social workers do coming up. And I was so delighted when I heard you were going to be the one that the Social Work Association was sending over. And I find your story particularly interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about your decision to change careers, to make what some would see as a pretty drastic career change?
Sure. It really started when I had an opportunity to help an old friend. Someone had come and, who I hadn't seen in years, had come and asked me for help, and they had been diagnosed with a mental illness. And they had been homeless and moving back and forth between Georgia and Florida for a couple of years. Since they had been diagnosed, I, at the time, assumed it was going to be very easy to get them help, and I was wrong. So I spent the next 2 years helping my friend get psychiatric treatment, medication, housing, applying for disability, and so on. And throughout the process, I really saw some of the best and the worst of what we had to offer people in that position in the community.
So was the social workers, was that a big part of the process? I mean, did you begin to get connected or see how that profession could help your friend, or where it was lacking, or what did you discover?
I did. I met a few social workers, and I was very impressed with the type of things that they would do. But moreover, it was through the process of helping my friend, I got to meet a lot of other people that had also been experiencing mental illness or addictions, homelessness. Some of them in and out of treatment centers, some were in and out of jail. And I was really in awe of the courage and resilience it took to live your life with facing those kind of challenges. And I just decided that I wanted to help them get the dignity and respect they deserve.
So I bet you had to go back to school, didn't you?
Yeah, yes I did. In fact, I decided to, I researched what I could do as a helping profession. I first considered psychology, but over the process of researching, I realized that social work was more of a fit for me. So I started with Florida State University, who has a part-time program where they have professors come here to Gainesville and teach classes on the weekends.
Now, I know you mentioned before the interview started that you did volunteer work with the UF Institutional Review Board and the Integrative Medicine Program. Was that as part of your educational process, or was that before you went back to school, or where did that work come from?
Yes, the answer is yes to both.
Okay.
It was part of my process. I needed to wait for the social work programs only starts every 2 years. And in my research, I first of all found out that social workers base a lot of what they do, most of what they do, on evidence-based practice, which is basically research-informed work. And I didn't know much about research. So when the opportunity to serve on the IRB came up, I jumped on it as a chance to both learn research as well as serve a population. If you're not aware, what the Institutional Review Board is it's essentially the ethics committee, and our mission is to protect the rights and welfare of human research subjects at the University of Florida as well as its affiliate institutes.
Is that right? And what about the integrative medicine program?
That is, I started with that, which was, before they did the name change, was Shan's Arts in Medicine. And I was working with a yoga instructor and meditation teacher. Again, in my research on social work, I became interested in mindfulness-based practices, and I wanted to get started learning how to do that work.
And then I know you're currently enrolled at Florida State, and what kind of educational requirement did you need? You mentioned it was a 2-year program.
Yeah, a master's in social work requires obviously having a bachelor's degree. Some people come into it with a bachelor's in social work, which I didn't have. I had behavioral and social science was my undergraduate. But part of the education process is, for a BSW, you'll have, in addition to your academic work, you'll have 500 hours of actual field practice. And in my master's program, I'm receiving 900 hours of field experience before I graduate.
Excellent.
So.
What type of careers? I mean, when you have a master's degree in sociology or social work, what type of career is available to you?
That's a great question. Actually, there's a whole variety of areas where social workers are, including mental health, healthcare, substance abuse. They work in hospitals, community health centers, community mental health centers. There's also home health care, aging, and in schools, working with children.
You mentioned in your bio that you worked for the Alachua County Court Services OPUS program, or you did an internship there, or what was your involvement with that program?
Yes, that was the first of 2 internships in my program.
Okay.
We start out early in the program doing a 432-hour internship, and I was working with OPUS, assisting in doing substance abuse counseling for day report probationers.
And tell me about that experience.
Oh, it was fantastic, actually.
Yeah.
I had an amazing supervisor who had taught me a great deal, and she allowed me to really get involved with the clients.
Let's give her a plug. What was her name?
Her name is Tara Levon.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I always like to highlight county employees wherever I can.
Yeah.
And I know that you talked about a variety of occupations. I know there are a lot of Alachua County employees that are social workers. Candy Nixon is our social services director, and they do an incredible variety of work at the Community Support Services office that's located with the Alachua County Health Department on the east side of Gainesville. Tell me about the National Association of Social Workers. I guess what I'm saying is, how did you get roped into doing this interview?
Well, as you mentioned in my bio, I've been involved even in my prior career with professional organizations. I'm a real big fan and supporter of them because they can really help accelerate one's learning curve. And entering into a new profession like social work coming from business, I really wanted to get engaged right away. In fact, I actually attended my first NASW meeting before I started my first class. Right after I got my acceptance letter, I became a member and went to the first steering committee meeting.
And before I go too much further, for those that don't really understand the nature of what a social worker does, I mean, you've mentioned some of the professions, but let's back up a little bit and talk about the history of the profession, how it evolved, what circumstances led to this profession existing. Can you take us back to the beginning?
Sure. My direct practice professor was probably watching, so she'll really appreciate me remembering this. But social work in the United States, we generally mark our origins with the settlement house movement near the turn of the century. Jane Addams was active in that, and she had worked with immigrants in Chicago. And she was also a peace advocate leading up to and during World War I. And as a matter of fact, Jane Addams was the first woman to receive a Nobel Peace Prize in 1931.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What was a settlement house exactly?
It was dealing with the immigrant populations that were living in Chicago.
So as they were coming in mass numbers, it would provide housing or something?
They helped provide housing and various services. It was more or less, it started its origins in charitable work, and over the course of the century, it had evolved into becoming a professional practice, where we now have, there is, I believe, 600,000 active social workers with master's level degrees in the country. Here in Florida alone, we have 7,000 master's level social workers, LCSWs, which is licensed clinical social workers, and another 3,000 registered interns, which is someone who has gotten their master's degree and is working on their hours. As I mentioned, I'll do 900 hours in my program. After I graduate, I have another 1,500 hours of experience to receive my license. So.
Have you decided which branch you want to follow, or are you still open?
That's a good question. One of the best pieces of advice I got when I started the program was to treat it like a buffet in terms of getting experience in all different areas. And one of the areas that I am leaning toward is both working with veterans. The VA is actually the country's largest employer of social workers, which, and by the way, social workers providing mental health services, there's more social workers than there are psychiatric nurses, psychologists, and psychiatrists combined.
Is that right?
As far as mental health providers.
Now, let's say you're dealing with a client with mental illness. Where does what a psychologist does leave off and what a social worker does begin? Is there crossover between those two things?
There's certainly crossover, and there are some things that a clinical psychologist can do that a licensed social worker can't, usually in the area of various testing. But generally, as far as mental health services, direct services are provided, clinical social workers can do most everything that a psychologist can do. It's really a difference in orientation a little bit. Psychology tends to focus a little bit more on individual pathology, where a social worker takes a more systemic view, and we look at not only the individual but the family systems, groups, community level also. So sometimes the intervention for a client is not necessarily within the individual, but it's within their environment.
I see. Well, let's go back to the NASW.
Yes.
When did you join the organization?
It was right when I started the program, so I guess it was in 2012. As I said, I went to my first NASW meeting before I went to my first class.
And they made you an officer fairly quickly, it sounds like.
Well, not quite. I did start out, I did become the student rep for the master's level student rep, and I just continued to participate. One of the big advantages for me coming into the profession was not only networking with other working social workers and learning about it, but we also hold a monthly continuing education class, which is free for students and members. So for me, it was like getting an additional bit of education every month.
Is the local chapter active? I mean, are there a lot of participants?
Absolutely. In fact, Florida, the state of Florida is considered what they call a mega chapter, which is we're the 10th largest in the country. And the Gainesville unit, which I serve on, has about 230 members.
What is the mission of the organization?
Well, the mission of NASW on one level is to serve the profession and to help individuals within the profession. Like, for example, NASW helped advocate to get title protection for the title social worker. You have to have the credentials to actually use the title. NASW is also very active in legislative policy advocacy work. But more importantly, the mission of NASW is really the mission of the profession. and that's to enhance the well-being of human beings, to help provide their basic needs. And we particularly pay attention to those that are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty.
Are there, does it deal with the ethical concerns of the social worker, his or herself? Is there a code or a code of ethics that you swear to uphold? Or?
I'm not quite sure if we swear to it, but we definitely, one of the major contributions to the profession that NASW has is our code of ethics. And it's based on our core values, which include service and social justice, the dignity and worth of the person, human relationships, professional competency. So yeah, yes, I'm trying to recite them from memory.
You're doing a great job.
But the code of ethics, it is the standard that we use in the profession. And while NASW members are all, as a member, you agree to abide by them. Actually, the code of ethics is also used by most state licensing boards when there is an ethical concern in the profession, and they usually refer to the NASW Code of Ethics. So even if you're not an NASW member, it really is a guiding principle for the profession.
Is there a requirement in this field, Paul, to pursue continuing education? Do you have to take credits to keep your license active, or how does that work?
Yes, yes. After your initial 1,500 hours of face-to-face psychotherapy work, and it also includes 100 hours of supervision to get your license, and there's 15 hours of courses that you take, including laws and rules, domestic violence, and HIV/AIDS education. And then each year there's an additional 30 CEs, I believe, that licensed professionals need to get each year. And that's part of what our association does, is we provide those free for our members.
Oh, you provide, that provides the service. So tell me about Social Work Month. I know it's coming up, right? Or is it now? When is it
March
exactly?
is National Social Work Month.
Okay.
Yep, and we hold a celebration each year, and this year it's going to be at Okamic, where the industry, the local social workers get together, and we essentially celebrate ourselves. We also give out some awards at that event as well. So.
And I believe the County Commission is going to be doing a proclamation, is my understanding? Yes,
as a matter of fact they are. We had submitted that, and I believe it's February 25th. I think I'll be back to receive that when Commissioner Pinkelson reads the proclamation at the County Commission meeting.
And let's dig into the local organization a little bit more. Who are is there a chairman of the local chapter or a president?
Yes, great question, actually. Okay. Our recent past president, Billy Spivey, is now the president-elect for the state.
Oh, is that right?
For the state organization. And Tanya Fuchs had taken over for him as our current chairperson.
And what is your position on the board?
I'm the membership chair. After I served my year as the student rep, we brought another student to take over as the MSW rep, and I moved up into the membership chair. And also we actually have this year, for the first time, BSW reps. For many years, FSU was the only program locally that provided degrees in social work, but now St. Leo University also is offering a BSW and MSW program. So we actually have 2 BSW reps.
So do you commute to Tallahassee, Paul?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I decided I wanted to accelerate my program, so rather than continuing part-time on the weekends, so last semester I went to Tallahassee twice a week to get some of the courses that I wanted, and now this semester I go up there once a week.
So I'm fascinated by why you went into it, and I mean, obviously it's a career path that you would encourage people to look at. And was it a major mindset kind of a change to go from the private sector and the rewards that might have to offer to public service, or I guess you would call this a public service.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was challenging. It was challenging for me even personally because I had been the director of a department, and I had to adapt to becoming a student again. And that had been quite a bit of a challenge. In fact, I struggled quite a bit for the first few semesters of getting used to becoming a student again. And but I had some great support from the university to kind of help me through it, and eventually the skills that I acquired in business were really able to help me succeed in classes as well, you know, the organizational skills and things like that.
If you were advising somebody who was just starting their college career, I mean, does it make sense to get your undergraduate degree in social work if that's your ultimate goal, or what would you recommend?
It's not required to have a degree in social work, although I think one of the big advantages is that if you did really know you want to do social work, your BSW program would give you 500 hours of field experience before and then advanced standing at the master's level. So a lot of what the social work profession is about, I mean, classes are important, absolutely, education is critical, but we really do focus on giving hands-on experience to the graduates.
Excellent, yeah. Well, is there anything you'd like to add about the profession? We're just about out of time, but...
I think one thing that is important to mention, I had mentioned that we focus on legislative advocacy, and in fact the NASW publishes what's called Social Work Speaks, which is essentially like 60 some odd policy briefs on legislative issues. And we also have what's called a Legislation, Education, and Advocacy Day. I think it might be coming up in April, I'm not sure.
Up in Tallahassee? Up
in Tallahassee, where social workers from all around the state will go up to Tallahassee and speak to lawmakers. One of the big issues that are on the table this year is NASW, along with a lot of the universities, have been involved in blue ribbon panels to help professionalize child welfare. As you may know, there was a lot of child deaths were experienced in Florida.
Right. And
the legislature and various universities of social work, which there are 14 of them in the state of Florida, as well as NASW, had looked into the issue. And one of the things, as I was saying, with BSWs and MSWs, we come into the profession right out of school with a great deal more clinical experience than virtually any other degree.
Right, right. So does the Department of Children and Families hire social workers? I guess they must, right?
They do, yeah. And where our position is with NASW is that they need to hire more.
Right.
And that was really the critical issue, is that we need more social workers working in child welfare.
Is there anything else on the legislative front as we're going into the new session in Tallahassee that you all are keeping an eye on, or is that the major issue? That's
a great question. That's the major issue, I know, but actually our CE event next month, or actually next week on the 20th, is actually on legislative advocacy. Oh, okay. And that's where we'll, get the briefing for what's going to be our priorities for 2014.
Right. Well, maybe I'll see you up in Tallahassee this session. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you,
Mark. I
Mark.
really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you.
I'm Alachua County Manager Betty Baker. Welcome to Take 5. Take 5 highlights the people, events, programs, and services that make Alachua County such a cool place. A place where nature, culture, and innovation meet. So take a look, take a break, Take 5.
For those left behind, the loss of a loved one to suicide can seem unbearable, even incomprehensible, and finding answers or peace of mind elusive. In Alachua County, there is now a place where the survivors of suicide can go to find some peace, an oasis of tranquility located in the city of Gainesville's Coffran Nature Park, the Survivors of Suicide Memory Garden.
We believe that this is the only such garden in the United States and perhaps the world, because there is such stigma with suicide that people are afraid to talk about it.
And that stigmatization not only prevents discussions, it can also leave survivors feeling isolated.
Often survivors of suicide are on the margins. Suicide grief is different. It's a different type of grief. And this space provides a place for survivors to come together where there is a sense of community.
The garden is the result of the collaboration of the Alachua County Crisis Center, the City of Gainesville's Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Department, and the Friends of the Crisis Center.
I don't think any of us on the board at the time had any idea what we were getting ourselves into. And looking back, I'm glad that we didn't. For this garden was truly built by angels, both seen and unseen.
Former County Crisis Center employee Gladys Coffrin donated the land for Coffrin Nature Park to the City of Gainesville more than a decade ago. The city readily agreed to add the Survivors of Suicide Memory Garden shortly thereafter.
I always say that this park is something that I'm the most proud of being a part of. And now I can add to that another thing that I'm very proud of, which is being a part of the memory garden that we're all here to dedicate today.
People who worked on this garden represent a huge cross-section of the community, and I was really very impressed to see how many different groups and partnerships were formed as a part of this garden. It's a statement to the generosity of this community that so many people were involved.
Artist Greg Johnson created the garden's striking centerpiece, a sculpture representing the loss of suicide and its far-reaching effects on the estimated 6 individuals who are directly affected by each suicide.
The original touch note was that 6 people are strongly affected by suicide. And once I realized that the stones had to represent human scale, because this was a sort of a memorial that people sort of expect a figurative tradition, but we just didn't want the simple idea of a individual crying on a bench.
Instead, the piece's abstract nature, its physical accessibility, and accompanying sculpted benches allow the viewer to interact with and be part of the mourning process depicted, in a small way sharing in a sense of loss without a sense of intrusion. But it is a very real loss that motivated some involved in the garden's creation.
I lost my son to suicide 10 years ago when I was asked to take on the garden. This was something that I could touch and feel, and that this is something that's going to be here long after I'm gone, and it's someplace that survivors can come and realize that they're not alone. It's been so therapeutic to come out here and work on this garden and work towards something that is real.
As a city commissioner, I wanted to be here today on behalf of the city and the citizens of our community to say thank you to all the folks that made this space possible. But then as an individual, I've been touched by suicide, and my sister as well, having lost my grandfather and 2 of our siblings to suicide. And so we wanted to be here to bear personal witness to the value of having a community space and a community recognition of this loss, but also of how to move forward with that loss.
For Take 5, I'm Alan Yetter.